Imagine this. One of Hollywood's most cherished icons, a man who has transformed decades of personal hardship into hope for millions, walks into what should be a simple, friendly interview. But instead of a routine conversation, he suddenly finds himself blindsided by someone he once believed was an ally. And what happens next isn't just awkward, it's explosive. What you're about to hear goes far beyond an uncomfortable celebrity exchange. This is a story about a moment that stunned viewers across the country. A moment that exposed something unsettling beneath the polished surface of fame, advocacy, and the compassion we assume public figures always possess. Because in this interview, everything changed. This wasn't just a minor disagreement on live television. It was the clash that spiraled so wildly out of control that it ricocheted through international headlines. It was the confrontation that proved even the most admired personalities have limits, pressure points, and moments when their patience snaps. And on this day, one line was crossed. A line that could never be uncrossed. The morning began with nothing but optimism inside the studios of The View in New York City. Golden sunlight poured through the massive windows overlooking Manhattan, washing the set in a warm glow. Crew members moved through their usual motions, adjusting cameras, checking microphones, reviewing the day's rundown, all with smooth, practiced ease. Energy buzzed through the building. After all, Michael J. Fox was coming. To the public, Michael wasn't just another guest. He was, and still is, a symbol of resilience. After years of speaking openly about living with Parkinson's disease, raising millions for research, and offering hope to countless families, he remained that rare kind of celebrity adored by nearly everyone. No scandals, no drama. Just a genuinely good man trying to make life better for others. As the audience filtered into their seats, their excitement was unmistakable. Many had grown up watching him, from his early sitcom days to his legendary films and later as a writer and advocate. Some were patients themselves. Others cared for loved ones battling Parkinson's. They came seeking inspiration, updates on new breakthroughs, and the comfort of hearing from someone who understood their struggles on a deeply personal level. But none of them knew what was coming. Backstage, makeup artists did their final touch-ups, while Michael reviewed his talking points. He planned to discuss his foundation's latest research, share stories from his new memoir, and bring his usual blend of hope and humor to the conversation. It was familiar territory. Interviews he had done many times, always with grace and steady optimism. What no one realized, however, was that Whoopi Goldberg had arrived in a strangely tense mood. Those familiar with her might have noticed the signs. Her jaw tightly set, her gaze unfocused, her notes clutched with unusual intensity. Still, most chalked it up to another day on a show known for passionate debates. But this wasn't passion. This was pressure. When Michael finally stepped onto the stage, the room erupted in applause. He moved carefully but confidently, smiling warmly at the crowd. His tremors were visible but natural. A part of him he never hid, never dramatized, simply accepted. The co-host greeted him with genuine enthusiasm. Joy Behar smiled brightly. Sunny Hostin gave him a warm hello. Sarah Haynes looked thrilled. Alyssa Farah Griffin beamed with excitement. Everyone welcomed him with open arms. Everyone except Whoopi. She barely glanced up, offering only a brief nod as he sat down. A quiet discomfort settled over the table. Anyone who knew her well could see it immediately. This wasn't her usual pre-show focus. This was something colder, sharper. Michael adjusted his microphone, still smiling at the audience, unaware that the tone of the interview had already shifted. And then it began. "So, Michael," Whoopi said abruptly, her voice slicing through the air, "you're here to talk about your foundation, but let me ask you something. Isn't it a little convenient how you always show up right when you need people to feel sympathy?" The audience froze. Every smile dropped. Every co-host stiffened in shock. Michael's expression faltered only briefly before he regained his composure. "I'm not sure what you mean by that." he replied, his tone still gentle but now edged with confusion. But Whoopi leaned in, her posture unmistakably confrontational. Come on, Michael. Every time you have something new to promote, suddenly your condition is front and center. It feels like you use it as a crutch, and just like that, the air was gone from the room. The atmosphere in the studio shifted so suddenly it was as if someone had opened a door to the Arctic. Gasps rippled through the audience. Camera operators exchanged wide-eyed looks, unsure whether to keep filming or cut to commercial. In the control room, producers were undoubtedly scrambling, trying to determine whether this was a planned bit or if Whoopi Goldberg had genuinely just accused Michael J. Fox of manipulating public sympathy. And the shockwave hadn't even fully hit yet. Joy Behar jumped in immediately, her tone sharp with alarm. Whoopi, that feels a little harsh, don't you think? But Whoopi didn't back down. In fact, she seemed fueled by the stunned silence that followed her words. No, Joy, she said firmly. It's a legitimate question. We're grown-ups here. Her eyes locked onto Michael, colder now, harder. Michael, you've made millions talking about Parkinson's. How are we supposed to know this isn't just another publicity maneuver? A flicker of tension showed in Michael's jaw, the only visible sign of his growing discomfort. But his voice remained calm and deliberate. Whoopi, I've been living with Parkinson's for over 3 decades. This isn't a tool for attention. It's my reality. Every single day. And if speaking openly helps others or moves research forward, I'm grateful to do it. But if Whoopi heard him, she didn't care. That's exactly the issue, she shot back, her voice rising with conviction. You've turned your illness into a brand. The foundation, the books, the endless interviews. At what point does advocacy turn into exploitation? Now the tension felt suffocating. The entire studio seemed to shrink, pressing down on everyone. Breathing felt harder. Thinking felt harder. The surreal disbelief in the room was unmistakable. This wasn't a disagreement anymore. It was a detonation. Sonny Hostin stepped in, trying desperately to steer the moment back to sanity. Michael, maybe you can share some of the recent breakthroughs your foundation has supported, she offered brightly, fighting to keep the segment on track. But before Michael could answer, Whoopi cut in with a smirk. Let me guess, she said bitterly. More money needed, right? It's always more money. Michael inhaled slowly, visibly working to keep himself grounded. Actually, Whoopi, our foundation has invested over $800 million in research, leading to major advancements in treatment options. We've helped millions worldwide. 800 million? Whoopi echoed, dripping sarcasm. And how much of that went to administrative overhead? How much went into your own pocket? The audience shifted uncomfortably, confused whispers breaking out. This was supposed to be an uplifting, hopeful conversation, not a public interrogation, but the spiral was only accelerating. Michael turned to her, and for the first time, a subtle hardness threaded through his voice. I don't take a salary from the foundation, he said. Not a penny. Every dollar I've contributed comes from my own funds or from donors who believe in the work. Whoopi waved her hand dismissively as though brushing away something insignificant. Sure, and I'm sure all that is completely transparent. The insinuation hit like a direct slap. Michael's face reddened slightly, though he held himself steady. The effort was visible now. Sarah Haynes, clearly rattled, jumped in to salvage the moment. Michael, she said softly, in your new memoir, you talk about finding hope in hard times. What message do you want to share with people who are going through their own health struggles? Michael smiled gratefully. Finally, a real question. But once again, Whoopi cut in before he could speak. Oh, here comes the motivational speech, she sneered. Let me guess. Never give up. Look for the silver lining. Sound familiar? This time, the audience reacted audibly. Murmurs turned to restless shifting and expressions of outright discomfort. Many were no longer confused. They were offended. Somewhere along the way, tough questions had twisted into cruelty. Michael steadied himself, drawing a long breath. Then he did something no one expected. He turned away from the panel and looked straight into the camera. "You know," he said, speaking directly to the viewers at home, "I came here because I believe this was a place where real, honest conversations could happen. I wanted to talk about what patients and families are facing every day." "Real conversations?" Whoopi barked out a harsh laugh. "Is that what we're calling sales pitches now?" Slowly, visibly, something inside Michael cracked. Tiny fractures appeared in that famous patience, the calm he had maintained for decades, even through unimaginable challenges. "Sales pitches?" he repeated quietly, disbelief mixing with frustration. "Whoopi, I'm talking about people who are suffering, people who need hope, people who are praying for better treatments, and maybe one day, if we're lucky, a cure," Michael finished, his voice steady but weighted with purpose. "And you're the hero who's going to ride in and deliver that cure, huh?" Whoopi challenged, leaning back with her arms crossed. "The Hollywood savior riding in on a white horse?" "No," Michael said firmly. His trembling hands didn't weaken the strength in his tone. "I'm just someone who refuses to stop fighting. Someone who believes that if you have a platform, you're responsible for using it to help others." Joy Behar finally snapped. Her cheeks were flushed red with disbelief and anger as she rounded on her co-host. "Whoopi, seriously, what is happening with you today? This is completely out of line." But Whoopi wasn't backing down. Something in her expression revealed she had crossed a personal point of no return, driven by emotions no one else in the room fully understood, and everyone could feel the shift. "What's inappropriate," she countered, raising her voice, "is when we don't ask tough questions. What's inappropriate is letting celebrities use this platform as their personal fundraising machine without any accountability." "Fundraising machine," Michael repeated, his voice rising for the first time as anger began to seep through. "Whoopi, I'm not here to ask for money. I'm here to talk about science, research, real people. People who need hope." "Hope," Whoopi scoffed, the bitterness unmistakable. "Hope doesn't pay the bills, Michael. Hope doesn't fund your lifestyle." That sentence sent a ripple of shock through the co-hosts. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, fury tightening her voice. "Whoopi, enough! This is beyond disrespectful. Michael is a guest on our show. He deserves basic civility." Whoopi's head snapped towards Sunny, her eyes blazing. "I'll show respect," she said coldly, "when guests stop coming here and treating our audience like they're gullible. When they stop pushing emotional sob stories as a way to manipulate people." The phrase emotional sob stories hung in the air like poison. Michael rose slowly from his chair, his hands shaking, not from fear, but from barely contained emotion. When he spoke, his voice carried a quiet intensity that stopped everyone in their tracks. "Emotional manipulation?" he repeated. "Whoopi, I share my story so people don't feel alone, so they know someone understands what they're going through. If you consider that manipulation, then we have nothing more to discuss." "Finally," Whoopi said with a sharp, triumphant edge. "Some honesty. So you do admit you came here to manipulate the audience?" "That's not what I said," Michael replied, and the anger in his tone was now unmistakable. "And you know it. But clearly, you made up your mind about me long before I walked onto this set." The audience murmured loudly now, several people calling out words of support for Michael. Alyssa Farah Griffin leaned forward, visibly shaken, trying to regain control. "Maybe we should take a commercial break," she suggested gently. "Let's just pause and regroup." "No," Whoopi snapped, unmoved. "The audience deserves to hear the truth." She looked directly at Michael, her stare sharp enough to cut glass. "Michael, how much money have you personally made from your Parkinson's advocacy?" Michael's mouth fell open slightly, shock rendering him speechless for a moment. I cannot believe you just asked me that. It's a simple question, Whoopi pressed, voice hard as steel. If you're the selfless hero everyone claims you are, then you shouldn't have any issue answering it. The room held its breath. When Michael finally spoke, his voice trembled. Not from illness, but from profound hurt controlled by sheer willpower. The only thing I've gained from my advocacy, he said carefully, is the knowledge that I've helped people. But apparently that's a concept you struggle to understand. The words landed like a spark hitting dry timber. Whoopi's face darkened instantly, fury replacing the thin layer of professionalism she had been clinging to. Her smile vanished completely. "Foreign to me?" she said, her voice dropping into a deadly whisper. "You think helping people is foreign to me? I've fought for causes long before you were a household name. I've used my voice for change while you were out there making millions pretending to be other people. This isn't a competition about who's been advocating longer," Michael said, still trying to hold himself steady despite the storm raging in front of him. "This is about basic human decency." Human decency? Whoopi let out a harsh, bitter laugh that sent a chill down the spines of everyone in the room. And at that moment, the interview truly crossed into territory no one could have imagined. "You want to talk about human decency?" Whoopi said, leaning forward like a predator closing in. "Fine. Let's talk about how you make sure cameras catch every tremor, every shake, at every gala and fundraiser you attend. That's not advocacy, Michael. That's choreography. That's performance art." A collective gasp tore through the studio. Someone in the front row cried out, "That's too far!" Joy Behar looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. This wasn't tense television anymore. This was outright cruelty, and the entire room felt it. "Whoopi, please, stop. Stop this right now," Joy begged, her voice cracking with emotion. But Whoopi didn't even glance at her. She was locked in, driven by something deep and raw and unsettling, blind to the discomfort radiating through the audience and her co-hosts. "No, Joy," she said sharply. "I'm done pretending. I'm done watching celebrities package their personal struggles as products to profit from, while real people suffer without the cameras, without the applause, without the luxury of sympathy on demand." Michael's hands trembled harder, whether from Parkinson's or from sheer emotional strain, no one could tell. But when he spoke, his voice hit with the force of a sledgehammer. "Real people suffer in silence," he repeated, hurt shaping every syllable. "Whoopi, I am real people. Every person living with Parkinson's is real people. None of us choose this disease. We only choose how to keep living in spite of it." "Oh, don't start the victim monologue," Whoopi snapped. "You've never been a victim a day in your life. You've been cushioned, protected, and praised for every struggle you've supposedly endured." "Supposedly endured?" Michael's voice cracked. Tears glistened in his eyes. "Whoopi, do you think I'm faking this? Do you think I chose for my body to betray me? For my muscles to stop listening to me? For my voice to change? For my career to be taken from me piece by piece?" "I think," Whoopi said coldly, "you turned a tragic situation into a profitable brand. And I think you've convinced yourself that makes you some kind of hero." Sunny Hostin slammed her palm onto the table, the sharp crack jolting the entire set. "Enough, Whoopi. This is vicious and it's wrong. Michael did not come here for you to tear him apart." "Vicious?" Whoopi fired back, turning her fury towards Sunny. "Asking real questions is vicious? Holding celebrities accountable is vicious? Since when?" "Accountable for what?" Sarah Haynes demanded, her voice tighter and angrier than anyone had ever heard from her. "For being ill? For trying to help others living with the same illness? What exactly are you accusing him of?" "For profiting from suffering," Whoopi declared, her voice booming with conviction. "For making millions talking about Parkinson's while real people, People without book deals, without foundations, can't afford their meds, can't get treatment, can't survive. Michael rose again, but this time he stood with fire in his eyes and steel in his spine. "You think I don't know those people?" he said, his voice shaking with raw, righteous anger. "I think about them every single day. They are why I do this. They are why our foundation raises funds. They are why we push research forward. Everything we do, every dollar, every study, is for them." "Your foundation," Whoopi mocked, dripping venom. "Your research, your awareness. Funny how it all circles back to you." "No," Michael said, his voice rising with calm, unbreakable conviction. "It's about finding better treatments. It's about giving the next generation more than statistics and guesswork. It's about making sure no one has to walk this path alone." "Better treatments?" Whoopi repeated. "Better options, like becoming a celebrity advocate? Like turning their illnesses into marketable brands?" The audience had turned fully against her now, booing, jeering, shaking their heads in horror. But Whoopi seemed utterly disconnected from their reaction, caught in the momentum of her own anger. Michael glanced out at the audience, at the tearful faces, the stunned silence, then back at the table of hosts who looked equally shaken. "You know something, Whoopi?" he said softly. His voice wasn't angry now, it was heartbreak wrapped in truth. "I came here hoping to talk about progress, about breakthroughs, about hope. Instead, I'm standing here defending my right to simply exist with a chronic illness." "No one's questioning your right to exist," Whoopi shot back. "I'm questioning your right to monetize that existence." "Personal gain," Michael echoed, disbelief turning into open anguish. "Do you want to know what my personal gain has been, Whoopi? I've gained the certainty that my tremors will worsen. I've gained the knowledge that speaking will become harder. I've gained the reality that every day will be tougher than the last." "And you've gained millions in book deals, donations, speaking fees, and sympathy points," Whoopi countered instantly. "Let's not pretend this hasn't been lucrative." Alyssa Farah Griffin leaned forward desperately, her voice cracking as she tried one last time to stop the train wreck. "Can we please, just for a moment, take a break?" Alyssa stepped in, her voice trembling with urgency. "Whoopi, we need to shift gears. People didn't tune in to watch a takedown. They came to hear about Michael's work, the work that's actually changing lives." "Character assassination?" Whoopi whipped around toward Alyssa, eyes blazing. "I'm the only one at this table brave enough to ask the real questions. The rest of you are blinded by celebrity shine." The energy in the room shifted, a warning tremor before an emotional earthquake. Michael moved closer to her desk. The tremors in his hands were visible to every person in the studio. But even more visible was the hurt on his face. "What's really happening, Whoopi," he said quietly, "is that you've chosen to tear down a guest for reasons none of us understand. You're using your platform to sow doubt and suspicion about real advocacy, work that helps people." "Real?" Whoopi stood up sharply. "You call it real when you charge 50 grand for a speech about Parkinson's?" "I donate those fees," Michael said softly, with the calm dignity of someone who no longer needs to prove himself. "Every single dollar." "To who?" Whoopi challenged. "Your publicist? Your PR team? A foundation with tax forms no one sees?" "Please." "To the truth," Michael replied. "But clearly truth isn't something you're interested in today." The studio held its breath, a silence heavy enough to snap. "The truth," Whoopi barked, her voice rising with every word, "is that you built an empire out of an illness? The truth is you've convinced the world you're a saint, when really you're just another Hollywood opportunist." The co-hosts instinctively stepped between them, forming a human barrier. Joy Behar frantically waved at the producers, slicing the air with her hand as if begging them to cut to commercial. The audience erupted in disapproval, some shouting, others standing in protest. "Opportunist?" Michael repeated, the word tasting bitter. If trying to help others makes me that, then fine. I'll wear the label. But what I won't do is let you insult the millions living with this disease just because you've decided to use me as a punching bag. You made yourself a target, Whoopi sneered, when you turned your illness into a public product. A product? The composure Michael had tried to hold on to finally cracked. This disease isn't merchandise. It's my life. It's my reality. And it's the reality of countless others who deserve respect. Not cynicism. I'm not dismissing anything, Whoopi insisted, stepping around her desk so she was inches from him now. I'm exposing how celebrity advocacy works behind the scenes. Michael met her stare head on. The truth about advocacy, he said, is that sometimes people with platforms try to use them for good. Maybe that's what you can't grasp. The tension hit a breaking point, the kind where nobody knows what comes next. But everyone knows something is about to give. Whoopi's cheeks burned with anger. Michael shook uncontrollably, whether from emotion or Parkinson's, no one could say. The other hosts looked like they were witnessing a collision in slow motion, powerless to intervene. The audience was fully against Whoopi now, their voices rising in unified outrage. Michael locked eyes with her. Despite everything, the tremor, the exhaustion, the tears threatening to fall, his voice was steady. I've spent 30 years fighting this disease, 30 years helping fund research, 30 years trying to give hope to people who think they have none. If you can't see the value in that, I honestly pity you. Pity? Whoopi snapped, her tone dripping with offense. I don't need your pity, Michael. What I need is for celebrities to stop pretending they're saving the world when they're just saving their careers. Saving my career? Michael shook his head in disbelief. Parkinson's ended my career. Everything I do now is in spite of the disease, not because of it. Oh, come on, Whoopi scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Your career was fading long before this. Back to the Future was ancient history. This disease gave you a second act. It kept the spotlight on you. The audience exploded. An avalanche of boos so loud it drowned out her last words. Joy rushed toward Whoopi, panic written all over her face. Enough! You have to stop! But Whoopi wasn't hearing anyone anymore. Relevance, she continued over the noise, her voice slicing through the chaos. Real relevance means tackling systemic problems, not comforting people with personal sob stories. Michael's voice cut through her rant like a blade. Personal struggles? He said, a dangerous calm settling over him. The room froze, the kind of silence that comes right before impact. Whoopi, Michael began, trying to steady the tremble in his voice. There are 10 million people around the world living with Parkinson's. Their struggles aren't isolated stories, they're shared realities. Their need for better treatments isn't personal, and it's critical. 10 million, Whoopi echoed with a mocking grin. And how many of them get to publish best-selling memoirs? How many get invited to award shows and red carpet galas? How many get TV specials to tell their story? You're absolutely right, Michael replied, his tone suddenly soft enough to draw the whole room in. Most of them don't get those chances. That's why I use mine to represent them. To represent them? Whoopi let out a cold laugh. Or to drown them out. To make sure your voice is the one people associate with Parkinson's. A ripple of shock moved across the set. Something had shifted, something dangerous. Sunny Hostin stood abruptly, her expression hardening. Whoopi, as one of your co-hosts, I'm telling you to stop. This isn't probing. This is cruelty. Don't lecture me on what this show stands for, Whoopi snapped, turning her rage toward Sunny. This program is about honest conversations, not celebrity worship. Honest? Sarah Haynes rose to join Sunny, her normally gentle voice sharp with anger. There's nothing honest about tearing apart a guest who came here in good faith. Michael lifted one trembling hand. Please, it's okay. Let her speak. I want to hear every word she has to say about people living with this disease. Whoopi seized the opening. People with Parkinson's deserve truth, not this glossy Hollywood hope you're selling. They need real solutions, not cheerleading. False hope? Michael echoed, stunned. Whoopi, our foundation has helped to develop new treatments, new therapies, even surgical breakthroughs. We've improved real lives. If that's false hope to you, then what does real hope look like? Real hope, Whoopi said, warming to her own argument. Real hope is addressing why medications are so expensive. Real hope is fighting for universal health care instead of throwing charity galas. You think I don't support universal health care? Michael asked, genuine bewilderment in his voice. You act as if scientific research and policy advocacy can't exist side by side. Whoopi, we can fight for both. Better treatments and better access. Can we? She challenged. Or does your brand of celebrity activism give politicians an excuse to ignore the bigger problems? Why fix the healthcare system when Michael J. Fox is raising money for research? The audience erupted, angry voices calling for Whoopi to apologize, to stop, to listen. Alyssa Farrah Griffin tried desperately to calm the room. Everyone please, but let's keep this respectful. Respectful, Whoopi barked, whirling toward the crowd. You want me to show respect to someone who's built a fortune on human suffering? Those words were too much. Something inside Michael finally shattered. I've donated more money to Parkinson's research than most people will ever earn in their lifetimes. His voice cracked with raw emotion. I have used every opportunity I've been given to fight for better treatments and better care. If that's what you call profiting off suffering, then you have a twisted understanding of suffering itself. Twisted? Whoopi stepped closer. Too close. What's twisted is a society that applauds celebrities for doing the bare minimum, while real advocates get ignored. Real advocates? Michael repeated, shaking with fury that could no longer be contained. I work with real advocates every single day. Scientists, doctors, patients, caregivers. They value celebrity advocacy because it brings awareness and resources they desperately need. Of course they value it, Whoopi shot back. You're bringing them money. But at what cost? At the cost of actual systemic reform. Joy Behar rushed back from speaking with the producers, her face pale and worried. Whoopi, we have to end this segment, now. End it? Whoopi blinked, genuinely confused. But we're finally getting to the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue? Michael repeated, nearly laughing at the absurdity. What we've had is not a discussion, it's a takedown. You invited me here under the guise of conversation and spent the entire time attacking my character. Under false pretenses? Whoopi's voice rose again. I invited you here to have a real debate about celebrity advocacy. And that's what we've done. No, Michael said, firm now. What we've done is listen to you project assumptions about my motives, dismiss the work we've done, and insult the millions of people living with Parkinson's. Producers were now visible behind the cameras, frantically signaling to cut. Panic was written all over their faces. Sonny stepped forward, looking straight into the camera. We're taking a commercial break. When we return, we'll be moving on to a different segment. A different segment? Whoopi's face twisted with disbelief. Why? We're not finished. Oh, yes, we are, Joy said sharply, authority ringing in her tone. This ends now. But Whoopi wasn't done. She leaned toward Michael one last time, her voice low and poisonous. Before you walk off this set, look into that camera and tell the audience exactly how much money you've personally made from your Parkinson's advocacy in the last 10 years. Michael stared at her. Long, silent, unblinking. The entire studio froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Everyone waited for his answer. Michael finally lifted his gaze from the table and looked straight into the camera. Not at Whoopi, not at the co-hosts, but at the millions of viewers watching in stunned silence. "I want to say something to anyone out there living with Parkinson's," he began, his voice steadying as he spoke. "You deserve respect. You deserve dignity. You deserve hope. And I want you to know that progress is happening, real progress. Treatments are improving, research is advancing, and no one should ever feel ashamed of their illness or the work they do to advocate for themselves or others." It was a powerful, heartfelt message, but Whoopi couldn't leave it alone. "That's not what I asked," she snapped, almost compulsively pushing the confrontation deeper. Michael didn't flinch. "It's the only answer you're getting," he said softly, a quiet finality in his tone. Then he turned to the other co-hosts. His expression shifted, gentler, worn, grateful. "Joy, Sunny, Sarah, Alyssa, thank you for trying to keep this professional in the middle of what was clearly an ambush." "Ambush?" Whoopi barked, incredulous. "This wasn't an ambush. This was journalism." Michael looked at her one last time, and in his expression there was no anger, only disappointment. A deep disappointment that hit harder than any insult. "No, Whoopi," he said. "This was something else. And I think you know that." The air in the studio thickened immediately, the kind of tension you feel in your bones. It was the moment everyone realized the situation had passed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Security quietly stepped toward the edges of the set. Audience members shifted in their seats, whispering nervously. The co-host looked horrified, embarrassed to even be sitting at the same table. Only Whoopi appeared untouched by the chaos. "Fine," she declared, as though she were the calm voice of reason. "If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't do interviews." Michael let out a short, humorless laugh. "Whoopi, asking difficult questions is journalism. What you did today? It wasn't that. It was something much uglier." And then, in a moment that would go viral within minutes, Whoopi turned to the producers and delivered the line that would haunt her career. "If he can't engage in an honest conversation about his advocacy, then maybe he should leave." The room froze. Every breath seemed to vanish at once. Michael looked around, at the audience, at the co-hosts, at the scrambling producers who were desperately trying to salvage the broadcast. He nodded slowly, as if accepting something he had known for several minutes. He unclipped his microphone, his trembling hands struggling with the tiny clasp. When it finally came free, he straightened his posture, determined to leave with whatever dignity he had left. "You're right," he said quietly. "I should go, but not because I can't handle questions." He paused, the entire studio holding its breath. "I'm leaving because this conversation doesn't help anyone. It isn't advocacy, it isn't journalism, it's cruelty. And I won't be part of cruelty." He turned toward the exit. And then the extraordinary happened. A single applause broke the silence. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on its feet, erupting into a thunderous standing ovation. People reached out to touch his hand as he passed. Others cried openly. Their applause was more than support. It was a loud, undeniable rejection of everything they had just witnessed. At the table, Whoopi sat with her arms crossed, watching him walk away with a look of smug satisfaction, as if she believed she had somehow won. But the reaction of the audience, and the stone-faced co-host refusing to look at her, told a very different story. By the time Michael reached the edge of the set, the applause was deafening. He paused, turned back toward the room, and held their gaze. He didn't need words. His expression said everything: hurt, disappointment, sorrow, and strength. Then he walked out, the door closing behind him with a gentle click that hit the room like the final note of a tragedy. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but it was too late. The damage was done. The moment was now part of history, recorded, shared, analyzed, dissected. It became a defining moment. When kindness met cruelty, when hope collided with cynicism, when a man who had spent decades helping others was forced to defend the simple act of caring. What should have been a routine promotional interview had transformed into something darker, something unforgettable. People debated it for weeks. Social media exploded with outrage. Commentators examined every second of the exchange. But one question overshadowed them all. What was Whoopi thinking? What possessed her to launch such an unprovoked attack on someone so widely respected? And what exactly did it reveal about celebrity culture or about herself? Whatever the answers are, one truth remains undeniable. No one who watched that day will ever forget it. And once again, Michael J. Fox showed the world what real courage looks like. Not the courage to fight, the courage to walk away with dignity, with principle, with humanity still intact.